Hello, my name is Stephen Redman and welcome to another episode of Pastor's Library. This is the channel where we talk about everything to do with theology books that are probably on a reading list for your seminary course or your bachelor's or master's degrees in theology or in biblical studies. Or maybe they're just books that you've seen on a shelf somewhere if you're lucky enough to have a Christian bookshop near you. Or maybe it's just out of general interest. As a person that is surrounded by books, I just want to share some ideas with you, which I hope will be of interest. If they interest you, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube. And if you haven't already done, please subscribe and click on the bell, because all that will do is help us get the message out to more people, and it will let you know whenever we release another episode of Pastor's Library. So today I want to talk about a couple of Festschrifts. These are books that are collections of essays by multiple authors which are normally in honour of a particular theologian. If a person does very well in the theological sphere, they may end up with one. I want today to talk about someone actually who's ended up with two, which I would say is a little on the unusual side. The person is an outstanding theologian, someone who his initial PhD is still available in print, which, considering how long ago it was, I think it was maybe about 83 or something like that, to say that is quite remarkable. And his name is Richard Hays, or Richard B. Hays to be clear. Richard is said to be the most outstanding theologian that America's produced in the last 50 years. He really is a very, very clever person, and he has come up with some outstanding books. I'm not going to go into his books today because we'll deal with that on another video, but I'm going to refer to these two Festschrifts written about him and one of his books that links the two together. So the first one is this: The Word Leaps the Gap. This was written in honour of his 60th birthday, and it is a collection of 32 essays over 710 pages, which is a significant size for a Festschrift. It has a host of really good authors that have composed an essay for this. James Dunn, E.P. Sanders, John Barclay, N.T. Wright, Luke Timothy Johnson, Joel Green, Leander Keck, Bruce Fisk, Walter Moberly, Stanley Hauerwas, and that's just a sample. I would have to say to you, this is a brilliant way of accessing the writing skills of a number of theologians. It's a great way to get into theology, and if I'm honest with you, that is the main reason I buy Festschrifts, because you get into such a range of other people's ideas, and you say to yourself, hang on a minute here, I don't like the way this guy writes, and so you never buy from them again. And you've been able to do that without buying one of their books, which has got to be a money saver. And on the other side, you find, oh, I really like this guy, I want to buy a book that he's written, and you get into people that way. So these are a very good way to get into reading theology. Now, in here is an article by Alan Verhey, and it's a response to a book that was written by Richard Hays called The Moral Vision of the New Testament. And this is my paperback version of it. It's a very, very worthwhile book. It's one that I have dipped into an awful lot, and I really like this book. Most of what he says is not only excellent, but I would say all of it makes you think. And if there's the odd thing that you disagree with, you are persuaded that he is speaking from an authoritative point of view, which you are allowed to disagree with, but it isn't that he's just thinking as he's warming up, which I hope you understand what I mean by that. It's a very Yorkshire phrase, but it is the sense that he doesn't just say things. He has reasoned opinions on the basis of Scripture and other theology supporting tomes. So this book leads us to this book, and in here you have a wide range of articles leading us to a contemporary view of New Testament ethics. When I say contemporary, this is a book that was first published in 1996. So for some of you it may not be contemporary, but it is still quotable in the realms of theology essays. It's got some great recommendations on the back. George Carey, who was the then Archbishop of Canterbury, N.T. Wright, Gillian Rao, Leander Keck, Ellen Charry and William Klassen. All of these are known people who leave us with something that is very helpful. And the book deals with issues such as violence, divorce, homosexuality, abortion. Some of these ideas are things that you may feel, I don't really want to go there. I don't want to spend time thinking about that issue. But these are ethical issues which Christians ought to have a position on, or at least understand the relative positions that are out there. And what I would say to you is this is a very good book for doing that. So, in that first Festschrift that I mentioned to you, Alan Verhey prints a response to this book, and he talks about violence. Richard Hayes takes the position in the moral vision of the New Testament that there is no circumstance where violence is ever justified for the Christian. Now, the way he talks about it, you can read his essay on this and you can think, I am persuaded. Whatever your overall view genuinely is, he is very persuasive on it. It's very good indeed. But Alan Verhey is also very persuasive. And he isn't condemning Richard Hayes in any way, but he's basically saying, well, I think it's probably a little extreme to say there is no circumstance that the Christian should engage in violence. And he puts up an argument to support his position. Now, I would say to you, this is the great way that theology books work, is people write one and then someone else writes a different view. It may be a subtly different view, it might be a slightly different view, but it's a different view. And as we read these together, we are able to come to our own mind on the issue, and it's a worthwhile position. So, a very, very worthwhile Festschrift, a very good book, and we might mention that in another video too. However, there is a second Festschrift in honour of Richard B. Hayes, and this one was written in 2021. So it's a good few years later. It's only 259 pages, and it consists of 11 essays with a foreword by N.T. Wright. And it's possible that you might say the authors of these articles are not as well known as the authors in the previous one. Now, as I read this, my eyes were drawn in the list of people to a J.R. Daniel Kirk, who has written an article about all things to do with LGBTQ inclusion. And his article is also a response to the chapter in the moral vision of the New Testament that deals with homosexuality. Now, I have read quite extensively on this issue, and I sort of thought, well, he isn't saying Richard Hayes was wrong. Well, have I misread Richard Hayes? I thought Richard Hayes had a fairly conservative view, and that he certainly had a biblical view of homosexuality. So I went back and read the section in that book and found that I am right. He does have that view. He's a very understanding person. He's very empathetic to people's problems, and he isn't in any way condemning, but he has the view that sin is sin. And he believes that if you are heterosexual or homosexual, you should use self-control. And I think that that is the biblical view, and I appreciated that. So this author comes up with something that you can only describe as 180 degrees away from Richard Hays. And he uses the moral vision of the New Testament to prove his point. Now, I really liked the article in the first one that took issue with violence, because it really did show the other side, and I found it was a helpful pointer that one could follow to help find one's own position. This, however, I just really didn't quite understand the logic or reasoning in the article. It sounded more to me that we had someone who had a made-up position and was trying to re-deal the cards to make themselves a hand that would support their position. And I think, quite bluntly, this article has been put in there because it was commissioned probably for this book, and it takes a position that is contrary to Richard Hays, and it does show you how you can make anything out of the Bible that you want, and you can certainly do that with theology books. And so what I thought was really interesting was in these two Festschrifts, both of which offer a lot, that they were linked by the one book that Richard Hays has written, or one of the many books that he's written. And we got, if you like, opposite viewpoints that came out of them, and that the editors of both books felt that these were articles worth printing and reading. And so I think that these articles shine a lot of light on Scripture and on 21st century ethics. And I think that they have an awful lot to offer. And I think these two Festschrifts not only do what I said initially, which they point out to you authors you may want to read again or you may not want to read again, but they both offer insight on how you can have a different opinion. One of them, I think, that's quite a reasonable different opinion, and the other which is probably an unreasoned different opinion. So that's my thought on these particular two Festschrifts and Richard Hays' book, The Moral Vision of the New Testament. I hope that's helped you. I hope that's given you some insight. I will do a video on Richard Hays' work separately soon, because he really has impacted theology reading for a generation very, very effectively. So I hope that helps you. If it has, remember to give us a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't done already. And I will just say until next time on Pastor's Library, bye!